Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So I thought this was going to be the last Wes Anderson movie I was going to talk about on this channel. Not like forever or anything. I assumed eventually I would like maybe watch some of the other ones with friends or something. But then I was on Amazon Prime because I'd finished watching this with my dad, and then he decided he wants to rewatch, or not to rewatch, he hasn't seen all the Wes Anderson movies. I have. All of these would be rewatches for me. He wanted to watch some of the ones that are on Amazon Prime. I think they're all on there, but you have to like rent them. So we picked out five that we're going to be renting within the week, which just means you're going to get more Wes Anderson reviews from me. And I'm actually kind of glad about that because there's two in particular I really wanted to rewatch, which is Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I remember I always really liked, and I've been wanting my dad to watch that one because I feel like he'd like it. And Rushmore, just because I feel like watching it again. But there's like some other ones in there too, like Bottle Rocket, which I'm kind of if I ever watch again, but I guess I'm watching it again. And The French Dispatch. Like I feel like with the three, I guess, newest ones, I could call it The French Dispatch, Asteroid City, and The Phoenician Scheme. I feel like all three of those, I kind of just need to watch again because I felt they were all kind of a little confusing, especially The French Dispatch because there's like multiple storylines going on, and also The Phoenician Scheme because that one's like very fast paced. Asteroid City, I remember, was just kind of being like my dad doesn't want to rewatch The Phoenician Scheme. I might rewatch that at some point because I think it's on Peacock. And I don't remember if we're gonna rewatch Asteroid City. I don't think so, but I don't remember. Maybe I need to give that one a chance too. That's the thing with rewatching a lot of these, is that it's either ones that I felt were kind of fast paced or kind of because sometimes with Wes Anderson movies, it's like they can be just kind of a lot going on at once, and I feel like sometimes you need to watch some of them multiple times, like the French Dispatch, for example, to really kind of understand what's going on. I feel like the first time you watch some of these, you kind of just have to really absorb everything. Or there's some of them like Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, The Royal Tenenbaums, that I remembered the plots of instead. Well, no, I don't really remember Bottle Rocket that well, to be honest. Or like the Royal Tenenbaums, I remembered. It's just I hadn't seen them in so long that I kind of want to watch them again to kind of get an opinion on them again. But yeah, there's three that I own on DVD: Royal Tenenbaums, Moonrise Kingdom, and Grand Budapest Hotel. Those three. Before I've been rewatching all of these, I'd say are my favorites. Grand Budapest Hotel has replaced Moonrise Kingdom as my number one favorite so far. I think Royal Tenenbaums replaces Moonrise Kingdom for second place as well. I'm kind of a little surprised about that. It's nothing against like Moonrise Kingdom or anything. I still really enjoy that one. I don't know if it was even anything with the movie or me or whatever. Like I talked about in my review of that. I just feel like it doesn't hit the same. Like I don't enjoy it as much, even though I still enjoy it. I think what I'm sort of realizing, because I noticed it with how I felt about the Grand Budapest Hotel and the Royal Tenenbaums, is that there's a lot of characters, or kind of with the Grand Budapest Hotel. This one especially has a lot of characters, as you can see on the poster, in terms of like important plot relevant characters and stuff. I feel like with those two movies, by the end of the films, I understand the characters and I feel like you kind of know all of them and they all have like a good amount of screen time. I feel like with Moonrise Kingdom, it's like there was like Susie's parents and Bruce Willis's character and the scouts and a bunch of other people, where it's like I felt like I didn't fully know any of them by the end. I guess because the main focus is on Susie, and I will be talking about the Royal Tenenbaums. I promise. I'm just this is part of my reflection that I've been having. Susie and what's his face, Sam. I always forget his name because my dad thinks that Sam looks like this kid I had a crush on the first game in the first grade, to the point where my dad will refer to Sam's character by that name, and it like mentally keeps throwing me off right now. Um, no, Sam and Susie, yeah. They're the main characters. They're the reason I love the movie so much, but the same, and I get the focus is supposed to be on them, but at the same time, I feel like there's other characters were sort of hinted at with things in their lives, and I almost wish we could have known them better. And I feel like with Grand Budapest Hotel and the Royal Tenenbaums especially, it's like even though there's all these other characters, it's I feel like I know all of them like an equal amount and stuff. Like I feel like with the Royal Tenenbaums, the three kids, as I'll call them, the Tenenbaum kids, even though they're like adults for most of the movie, are supposed to be, I guess like the you could argue like they're the main characters, or their father, his name's Royal, that's why it's called the Royal Tenenbaums. Royal is also the could be said to be like the central like main character, but it's like everyone gets enough screen time and development, which I think, well, not like everyone equally, but for the most part, mostly like the family and stuff. And I really like that, because this feels like, I mean, all the Wes Anderson movies pretty much have like troubled protagonists and can have like depressing storylines, but I feel like this is one of the like, I want to say one of the heavier ones, but I also need to rewatch some of the other ones, especially some of the newer ones, so I can't completely say in that statement, but that's what I'm feeling currently after just rewatching it. Like I was watching it with my dad, as I mentioned, and at one point in the movie he just looked at me and said like, "This is a really depressing movie," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Oh, by the way, I know usually when I watch movies with my father, I don't take notes, and I kind of just go off the top of my head, or I like refresh myself by reading on Wikipedia. I took notes this time. It was kind of funny because he saw me on my phone. He was just saying like tappity tap tap tap, and I'm like, yeah, I'm taking notes to talk about the movie later. And he said like, you're gonna be a, what was it? He said to me, he made a joke. You're gonna be a Wes Anderson film expert or something, and it's like, no, I mean, I just give my opinions on all of these, but with how many we're rewatching, it kind of does feel that way a little bit. I mean, we're only gonna be renting out like 5, so you're only gonna get reviews for me for these movies for like 8 out of the, I think, is there like 23 of these or something? I feel like that number's too big, but I feel like I read that somewhere. Hold on, let me see. Wes Anderson. How many movies do you have, Wes Anderson? It doesn't say. It's not telling me. It's listing out the movies, but it's not telling me how many. That's okay, because they go from 1996 to 2025. Okay, now I have to count these. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, there's like 13 of these. Yeah, 23 sounded like way too big of a number. Where the hell did I pull that out from? Maybe that's a number I read recently and it kind of stuck in my head. Okay, we're talking about this movie now. I know I just spent like 10 minutes rambling, but it was semi-important to this, I promise. Okay, so this is a movie. It's called The Royal Tenenbaums. The father. It's about a family. They're the Tenenbaums, and the father of the family is named Royal. I feel like I have to kind of introduce to you like the characters and stuff and what's kind of going on with all of them before I go off of like anything with my notes. I feel like it'll just make more sense anyway. Okay, I have to look at the poster to like. I feel like seeing their faces kind of helps me all with their names and stuff. Okay, I'll start with the dad. His name's Royal. I think he's played by Yeah, Gene Hackman. I don't have their names, the actors' names listed on screen or Wikipedia or anything, so I have to like go from memory. He and his wife, who is played by Angelica Houston. I don't remember what her name is. Her character's name. They're a couple. They bought this like really big house. I don't remember where this movie takes place. But they end up, they're not like legally divorced, but she ends up like kicking him out. I guess you could say they're like separated anyway. So for like 22 years or so, they she has to raise the kids. There's like a time jump. It's like the movie starts where it's like there's three children, and then 22 years later where they're all like adults and stuff. But yeah, she gets the house, she gets the kids, and he lives in a hotel for like 22 years or something. He's a really shitty person. I want to talk about that through my notes. I'm going to just read you the list I wrote of like terrible things that he's done, and then I'll talk about the other characters. I'm just going to get that out of the way, honestly. He when he introduces his daughter to people, he refers to her as like, this is my adopted daughter Margot, and not just saying like, oh, this is my daughter. Like, he constantly has to remind her that she's adopted and she doesn't really like fit in or anything. He would invite his son, I wrote Chaz in my notes, that's not right. Oh no, Richie, yeah. Only invited Richie. He has three kids, but he only invites one of them when they're like children to like hang out and stuff. So that child, Richie, is like kind of seen by the others like dad's favorite. His son Chaz, like from when he's really little, is like really good with like business stuff. So he ends up stealing money from his son. He mentions at one point, Royal, about cheating on his wife, and his wife is like going to be married to this guy named Henry, who's like a really nice guy and everything, and they do end up getting married at the end. But Royal's weird where it's like he cheats on his wife, and they're not living together or anything or like romantic anymore, but then is upset about his wife having suitors in the past and going to potentially be married to this guy that she's been in a relationship with for a while. It's like this whole thing where he's basically like, oh, I'm allowed to like date other women and it's fine, but my wife can't be with anyone else because she's still my wife. Like, he still sees her as his wife even though she already had kicked him out. They haven't spoken in like years, you know. And just a whole bunch of other stuff. He's an interesting character. I think my opinion of Royal has changed since the last time I watched this movie. I think this is like my third time seeing this movie. It's easy-ish for me to keep track of that number because I had watched all of these with my friend at some point, and before that I had like seen the movies for the first time like on my own and stuff. So I think this is my third time. But I remember with the last couple times I watched this movie, I didn't like Royal, which is fair. He's a horrible person and stuff. I think now I find him as a more fascinating character, especially his evolution throughout the story, where he starts out as like a dirtbag and then ends up becoming nicer as it goes on. He kind of reminds me of, and I mentioned it in my notes later, of Bill Murray's character in Groundhog's Day. They have like a kind of similar evolution where they kind of have to like learn to be a good person by sort of influencing the people around them and stuff, and it's about like making connections and repairing connections and stuff. But I'll talk about the other characters first, and then I think at the end I have more notes about Royal and that sort of like character growth I was talking about. So his wife, what is her name actually? I know it starts with an E. Why can I not remember what it is right now? Tenenbaums. I'm pulling up that Wikipedia page. No, I don't even need Wikipedia. I just need the cast. Etheline. Okay. That makes sense that I didn't remember it. I don't feel like that's a common name. Okay. Yeah, her name is Etheline. Etheline? I'll say Etheline. Etheline Tenenbaum. That's a long name, actually. But yeah, she wasn't as important as a character as I thought she was going to be, because it's been a while since I've seen this. She's the one that raised her kids, and that's kind of part of the reason they're the way they are now that I think about it, because they're child prodigies that end up being like sort of burnt out gifted kids is the way I could describe it by the time that they're adults. And when she raised them, she focused on their education, and that was kind of about it. And I feel like that was like good and bad for them. She kind of treats them like mini adults, and they were allowed to pursue the things they wanted to pursue and their interests and stuff, but it didn't really seem like she was super affectionate with them or anything. And you'd see in like flashbacks of the children with their father before he was like kicked out that he was like reckless with them, but still went out to do like fun things with them and stuff. But her thing is about how she wants to marry Danny Glover's character, Henry Sherman, but it's also that her ex, Royal, is like trying to get back into her life and to like win her and the rest of the family over. So that's kind of her only two things sort of going on in the movie, and that's like kind of about it. Okay, let me go back. I'm trying to cover at least like almost pretty much everyone on the poster. Hold on, there's a certain person in the cast I'm looking for, but he's not listed on here. Where? Oh yeah, there's a guy named Pagoda, because I was talking about Royal, so I have to talk about Pagoda. Pagoda is a character that's not really on the poster. I think because he's not like a plot-wise important character, but he's this guy I find kind of amusing, where he's like Royal's sort of friend slash assistant or something. I don't know. The only thing we really know about the guy is the way that him and Royal met, which I find kind of funny, but I'm also a little confused about. Is that Pagoda was, I think, hired to kill Royal and stabbed him in the stomach and then carried him to the hospital, and then like ever since they've been together, and Pagoda will pretty much do like anything Royal asks. Even when they both run out of money, he still like sticks with him and stuff. He ends up stabbing Royal again, which I wrote in my notes. That moment's actually pretty funny. And then you see them in this like old shitty hotel room or something, and Pagoda is like cleaning his wounds and stuff. So I don't know why he has this like weird loyalty to Royal. Royal's not like, sure as hell isn't like paying him or anything, but Pagoda is also a character. He's just not really like plot important or anything. He doesn't really have a lot of lines, but he's there, you know. Yeah, he's not on the poster. Bill Murray, I'm trying to go in like order of, I guess, sort of not importance to importance now. I don't know. I'm working up till I get to the kids. Bill Murray's character. Bill Murray actually doesn't have like a huge role in this, which actually sort of like, apparently he's been in like 10 Wes Anderson movies. I looked it up because I was curious about like who's the actor that's been in both. I mean, when I think of Wes Anderson movies, there's like certain actors that are in a lot of them, like Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray. And Olga Houston's only in like some of the early ones, or like the Wilson brothers. I swear there's like three of them, but I only really remember Owen and Luke in a lot of the early ones. They're both in this one, um, as different characters. Is there three? I feel like there's three because I remember Bottle Rocket having three main characters, and I thought it was all the like Wilson. But now I have to see. Damn it! Hold on, I have to Google this. Oh yeah, he also did like writing for this movie too. I find that kind of interesting. So he did the writing for like three of these movies. Yeah, okay. I knew it. Yeah, there's another brother. His name's Andrew. I don't know if he's in yeah, he's in Bottle Rocket. Okay, okay. Cool. I knew I got that number right. Sweet. We will talk about Owen Wilson and his character, but not at the moment. But yeah, Bill Murray is in like a bunch of the Wes Anderson movies. Sometimes he's like the important character. I think the one movie where he's like the main character is the one about the Marine Institute or something. Anyway, he's a side character here. He is this guy, I think his name's like Rayleigh or something, who he's Margot's husband. I feel bad for him, honestly, because she doesn't like treat him well or anything, in that he's like in love with her and is trying to support her, and she, kind of just doesn't feel the same way back, but is kind of stringing him along of like not divorcing him or anything, not really ever telling him how she truly feels. But I mean, she's also a secretive person and hides things from like everyone, as the family and the other characters eventually find out. But I do feel bad for him. He's just kind of there. She doesn't really give him the time of day, and she eventually gets called out on that, which I like. And he has a moment later on where he sort of kind of confronts her in his own way that I thought was like, yes, finally. And then after that, he's not really part of the plot anymore. But his thing that he's doing in the movie is he's like a psychologist or something. And there's this teenager, I'm thinking he's a teenager, this guy, I don't remember what his name is, who Rayleigh is testing him for some kind of mental thing, and then at the end he like successfully writes a book and does like tours about it or whatever, so he eventually ends up fine. But yeah, most of his scenes are with Margot and stuff. And now I can, oh wait, no, we have to talk about Owen Wilson, that's right, and I have to talk about Henry as well. I forgot about, I'll talk about Henry first, actually. So at the line, she's dating this guy named Henry. I feel bad for Henry as well. He's like a really nice guy. It's kind of funny. The last things I had seen Danny Glover in was the Lethal Weapon movies. And those were like back in the 80s. And I forgot this is from 2001. And I was like, whoa, why is he suddenly old here? And then I remembered, like, duh, that's how time works. I thought this movie was from 2004 for some reason, and then when I looked it up, it's actually from 2001, and that completely makes sense because there's a certain I'll say sculpture you see. I don't want to say what it is because I actually for once don't want to spoil everything at the beginning, that has the year as 2001 on it. So this entire time I thought, oh, this takes place in 2000. I mean, this is made in 2004, but takes place like a few years earlier. But no, movie's from 2001. I think the one that's from 2004 is actually, I think it's the Aquatic Life with Steve, whatever, if I remember correctly. Anyway, yeah, Henry's a really nice guy. I'm glad that he ends up calling Royal out on his bullshit early on, which is pretty nice. they get into an argument at one point, and I was actually a little disappointed their argument scene ends up getting interrupted. But yeah, his thing is being at the line's love interest. But you learn like a bit more about him towards the end. I kind of wish he was more of an important character. I thought he's pretty cool. He wears these like fancy like dark blue suits throughout the whole movie as well. Because he starts out as her like, oh gosh, what was it? No, not lawyer, not assistant. What's the word I'm thinking of? What's the person that helps you with like your taxes and things? Accountant? I think he was her accountant. Because Adeline, once her kids are all like grown and have left the nest, works as like a anthropologist or something. I think he's like her accountant. The kids know him as like Mr. Sherman. But yeah, I wish we could have seen a bit more of him. And then Owen Wilson's character is this guy named Eli, and he is Richie's childhood friend, and is just this kid that literally lived across the street from the Tenenbaums, and he's one of those kind of neighborhood kids that like visits constantly, where he's like sort of treated as a member of the family. He is kind of more of like a background character for a lot of this movie until the end. You'd think because he's mentioned in the beginning when you're seeing like all of the Tenenbaum kids as like kids, and then there's Eli, that he was going to be like more important, but he kind of just ends up in the background a bit, but he's still an important character. He actually ends up being the most successful out of all of them by the time the plot like actually starts, and I thought that was pretty neat. But I feel like that also makes sense because the three Tenenbaum kids, they're like gifted kids, and then everyone kind of forgets about them, and they're not doing any of their like talents anymore and stuff, and they're all sort of burned out and kind of depressed. But Eli ends up as like a English professor or something when the story starts, and he's really successful, and he has this big house and stuff, and he seems like a pretty chill guy, just doing his thing and stuff. He dresses as a cowboy for some reason. The story never says anything about it. That's just his thing, I guess. I don't think there's like a scene in this movie where he isn't wearing his cowboy hat. I just find that kind of funny. But then you find out that he's actually been like doing drugs, and he has a drug problem, and there's some like consequences about that towards the end, where he's like one of those characters that like at the beginning and stuff you think like, oh, he's successful with stuff, he seems to be doing fine, and he's the only one out of those like characters that's like pretty well adjusted, but then you find out he's like actually not okay. But yeah, that's Eli. I think there's more about him in my notes later. And oh yeah, the little dog, I think is named like Buster or something. I think he's pretty cute. He's also there until like the end of the story where he's more important and stuff. The end of this movie is like kind of wild actually. I almost really want to talk about it now, but I'll wait till I get through my notes and stuff. And then there's the three kids, which are more of like the main characters. There's Chaz, he's the one that's played by Ben Stiller in the tracksuit, and he has these two kids named Uzi and Ari, I think. It's never said if those names are like short for anything or that's just what they're called. I don't know. But his thing is that he also had a wife. They're the ones that own the dog, by the way. And the wife and the kids and the dog were all in this like plane crash or something, and the wife died but the others lived. So ever since then he's been like super duper overprotective to like paranoid levels about his kids' safety and knowing where they are at all times, and even waking them up in the middle of the night to practice fire drills. It wasn't stated in the movie. I swear I read it somewhere that like the reason they all wear like matching red tracksuits is so they stand out, kind of like how traffic cones are orange and stuff. I felt bad for the sons. They don't have like a ton of lines or anything where it's like they're not happy with how their dad's treating them and stuff, and then their grandfather Royal is like trying to connect with them throughout the movie, and kind of takes them out to go do fun things and stuff. And I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, it's like very reckless, and you even see that a lot of those scenes with his like grandchildren. Why do I keep wanting to say they're his nephews? But no, it's their dad, and then they're hanging out with their dad's dad. So that's your grandfather. Yeah. A lot of the things he does with his grandkids are like literally mirror the stuff that he did with his own kids before he was like separated from them and stuff, which I find really interesting. But it's sort of good and it's sort of bad, where Royal's like a bad influence on them, but at the same time it's like their dad doesn't their dad Chaz doesn't take them out to do like anything fun or actually hang out with his kids and stuff. So I think that's good. And through that and some other stuff that happens at the end, Chaz learns to open up a bit, because his thing is like he's overprotective with his kids and stuff is like part of his reaction to the accident, but he also hasn't really like gotten over his wife's death and stuff. I think it's taking the form of like being too overprotective of his kids, honestly. Chaz feels weird to watch because I'm so used to like Ben Stiller specifically. I mean, I know Owen Wilson is an actor that's in like a lot of comedic stuff as well, same with like Bill Murray. But Ben Stiller is the one I always think of for like comedies and stuff. Even with like Night at the Museum, I used to always say like, oh, Night at the Museum is like the one role I can like think of off the top of my head where he's like actually just like a normal guy and not a goofball. And I remember his character Larry is kind of a goofball a little bit. But he has to be like the straight man to all the museum characters like wackiness and stuff. But no, his character's pretty serious here, but it's just kind of weird watching him where it's like he's like supposed to be sort of a serious character, but like kind of played in a way where it still feels one of his usual like really comedic characters. So then it still kind of comes off as funny, I guess. It's just the way Ben Stiller like acts as this character, where he sometimes gets like a bit shouty and stuff. Maybe because he's also just in this movie with Owen Wilson, even though their characters aren't together a lot. I'm so used to associating them, like when I think of like Zoolander or something, with like each other, that it kind of just throws me off. I'm like, what are these two doing in like a serious depressing movie? I don't remember if this is the only Wes Anderson movie he's in. I feel like it is, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I feel like Chaz being almost a little comedic in a way, I think balances out his other two siblings, where Margot's depressed and, well, Richie actually is also depressed, but he's the one that's more on like the suicidal side actually. And then there's Chaz. Not saying that Chaz is like extremely lighthearted compared to the two, because you know he's going through the grieving process and everything and the stuff with his kids. It's just in terms of the performance and everything, he just kind of balances them out. He's like a little bit like they're all messed up, but he's like a bit lighter, I guess. I don't know if that completely makes sense. I want to talk about Margot. This is the only movie out of like the Wes Anderson movies that Gwyneth Paltrow's in. Like, I know she's an actress. I know now she does like, she's like a businesswoman. I remember seeing like the JonTron videos about the whole Goop thing. So I feel like in my brain I don't really associate her as an actor, so like I forget about that. I don't remember what else she's in. I know there's other stuff she's in. I know it's probably things I've seen. Now I have to Google that too. Damn it. Gwyneth Paltrow. Let's see. What movies are you in? Gwyneth Paltrow. Iron Man. Duh. Right. Yeah. Why did I forget Iron Man? That's like the biggest thing. Yeah. Iron Man, The Avengers. Okay. I haven't seen the movie Mordecai. I've heard that's bad. I don't know what Thanks for Sharing is. I don't know what most of these movies are. Oh, wait, no, I've heard of Shallow Hal, actually. That also came out in 2001. I don't remember her in Austin Powers. I feel like I vaguely remember. Okay, so most of the things she's been in are movies I've, like, never heard of. They also seem like a lot of, like, romance movies and stuff. There's maybe, like, besides, like, the Marvel stuff, maybe, like, two I've heard of her in. So she's been in stuff since like the 90s, but not anything that. Oh, damn, she's in like a lot of stuff. Yeah, mostly 90s to the 2020s. But yeah, when I think of her as an actress, this is the character I always think of. She's like a very iconic character, I guess, in terms of the Wes Anderson movies. It's kind of funny. I wanna mention about that real quick. There's a SNL parody of like Wes Anderson movies. I think it's called something like The Secret whatever concert, Secret something something of the Midnight Intruders, where it's like a parody of Wes Anderson movies in general, including a parody of her character Margot. And I didn't realize until I was rewatching this movie that it's like a parody of like several Wes Anderson movies, including like Moonrise Kingdom and stuff. But it's mostly a parody of the Royal Tenenbaums, and now I kind of want to watch it again, to the point where there's the song Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard that's used in this movie and in the parody, and the song popped up in this movie. I do have to talk about the music in here as well. And I was like, hey, wait, that's the song from the the trailer, the fake trailer or whatever. And I'm like, oh, they just pulled it directly from this movie. I thought that song was chosen just because it was kind of lighthearted and it fit, but kind of funny where it just sort of fit. Now I have to rewatch the parody again. Damn. Anyway, Margot, she's. What did I want to say about Margot? I don't remember. She wears that striped dress pretty much the whole movie, but in most stuff you see her in like other things or people dressing up as her or whatever, or the parody, she has this like sort of orangey brown like big fur coat, and now I'm realizing she doesn't even really wear it for much of the movie. I do find it kind of interesting the way I take it with her like costume specifically. Is you see when she wear, because the thing is with the three kids, they do kind of all dress, or well, no, it's just Margot and Richie actually that dress the same way as adults that they do as kids. Like Richie's always wearing this like tennis band around his head, and Margot is always wearing stripes. Chad doesn't. Chad originally wears like suits as a child, like business suits, and then switches to track suits as an adult. But that's because of the thing with his wife. Otherwise, if his wife is still alive, I think he'd still probably be wearing the suits, is my guess. I feel like Margot with it's because the striped dress, you can always see it under the fursuit. I like to think of it, plus this like specific hairpin that she wears, and she even has like the same haircut as like she never kind of grew up in a sense. But I mean, you could argue that with a lot of the characters in this, of this family, they all kind of live as if they're like stuck in the past, sort of stuck in time. And I feel like a lot of Wes Anderson movies have this sort of retro feeling to them. I like to think specifically this one and like Moonrise Kingdom. Well, actually, no. I think Moonrise Kingdom does take place in like the 60s or something, to be fair. This movie actually, like I mentioned, this one is the one that's most like time wise, with everything about it kind of weird, where it's like the music. Oh yeah, I can talk about the music now. I wanted to. The music in this movie is kind of interesting to me, where a lot of the Wes Anderson movies so far I've seen like seem to have their own like music and everything. This one has a lot of just like existing music. It's a lot of stuff from like the 60s, which I'll talk about in a minute. So it's like a lot of music from the 60s. The movie takes place like in the story in 2001, but you'd never guess that until it's revealed at the end, because the characters and like the design of their house and the locations and stuff all feel like it's from like the 70s or something. Everyone wears like a lot of brown and things. Just the way the buildings look, the cabs are like beat up to hell, to the point where every time one of the cabs, I think the cab company is called like Gypsy Co Cabs or something, every time one of those appeared, my dad started laughing at it because of how beat up the taxis are. This just has like an older, this movie as a whole has like an older vibe to it, even though, it takes place in like the 2000s. Technically, it should be one of the Wes Anderson movies that's like the most modern, at least out of the ones I've been watching. I don't know for some of the other ones. But yeah, I feel like it makes sense because it's like the characters feel like they're kind of stuck in time, so their world and the costumes and even the music all feels like it's kind of stuck in the past as well. But yeah, the music's interesting where it's a lot of like already existing music. Like I mentioned the song of like Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard. There's a Beatles song at the beginning of the movie when it's the narrator. Oh yeah, the narrator is Alec Baldwin. I forgot about that. I thought that's kind of interesting, and I feel like it really fits too. Um, when it's talking about the kids growing up and introducing the family and stuff, I think it's Hey Jude that's playing, and it threw me off where I'm like, I didn't know there's Beatles music in Wes Anderson movies. There's some of the songs from Peanuts. There's that song, what is it, Christmas Time is Here, that I think plays like twice in this. At first it's just like an instrumental of it, and then later on it plays and it has the children's voices singing and stuff. There's an Abbey Road reference on the back cover of the DVD. Okay, there's a specific song. I never know how to pronounce this, so I have to like look up what the word is real quick. It's a song I always associate with the game Mother 3, but I know it's like classical music. Number 3. I can like picture it in my head too, but I swear I never know what this piece is called. But like, I recognize it like every time. Okay, I have to pause this because I can't spell this word correctly because I don't know how it's spelled. Okay, I couldn't spell it or say it right. It's pronounced as Gynopédie. Number 1. I probably didn't get that right. That's the name of the song. I literally had to look up a video on YouTube. I'm like, how do I pronounce this? But it's a classical music piece. It's piano. It's really calming. That you just hear in like a lot of things, and it's one of those, like, I always recognize it when I hear it, and the only reason I even know the song at all is because there's like a cover of it in Mother 3. Man, that's such a good game. But yeah, that song's in here as well. I don't remember what scene, but it's in here. There's a song that plays. There's like this little yellow tent. In this movie, there's like a very important scene in there, and there's like a song that plays. The characters put on a record. I don't remember what it is, but I know my dad recognized it because he was kind of singing along with it a little bit. Anyway, my point is, a lot of existing music in this. Oh, right, we're talking about Margot. Yeah, sorry, I know this is already like 40 minutes, and I haven't really talked about anything that much. I guess talking about the characters does count, though, because the story's all kind of focused on them. So Margot is kind of an interesting character. I mean, they all are, but she's like very secretive of her family. You find a lot of, you learn more about her like as the movie goes on. She's like this child prodigy, like her brothers, where she's a playwright, and then eventually she stops writing plays. She's married to Bill Murray's character, but she locks herself in the bathroom like 6 hours a day in a bathtub and just watches TV on like the tiniest TV I've ever seen. She has a smoking habit. She smokes, but she actually managed to hide it from everyone. She's like supposedly been smoking since she was 12. They don't know how she's like missing her finger or anything. She has a wooden finger, which she gets cut off by an axe from trying to meet her like biological family. She like helps them cut wood and stuff. Margot is adopted, and but she was like adopted when she was 2, so she was like, I think, supposed to be like the same age as her siblings, but her father is the only one that ever says about how she's adopted, to the point where the movie's just like, yeah, every time he introduces her in a conversation, he just says like, "This is my adopted Margaret. This is my adopted daughter, Margaret." Like, he never lets her forget it. Basically, Royal's just kind of a butthole in that he does stuff like that, but doesn't think about like how the other person feels. So because of that, Margot's kind of feels like she's fit into the family even less. But her thing is that, and I need to talk about Richie, um, is she's in love with her brother Richie, and it's sort of weird for the two of them where they eventually admit their feelings. Where they're in this situation where, she's adopted, so they're not like biological siblings, but dating your sibling is still frowned upon in that, they were like raised as siblings, but they're both romantically interested in each other, so it's kind of a weird thing. Um, Richie, uh, his thing is, I guess, just being in love with Margot now that I think about it. Um, he's like a world famous tennis player. He ends up messing up his big match and then never playing tennis again because of Margot. He has a suicide attempt later in the movie that has to do with his feelings towards Margot. Oh, his Falcon's pretty cool, actually. I thought he was going to have a bigger role. His name's Mordecai. Um, he's not really, the Falcon isn't really like a character, but I feel like he kind of represents some stuff about Richie, where he's let go at the beginning of the movie, and then at the end he comes back at like a certain point in Richie's life, which I find kind of interesting. I'll talk about it later. Okay, I want to get into my notes because it's like 10 p.m. and I actually want to be kind of awake for my notes. I need to make sure I go to bed too because I have a movie I am very, 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 very excited about to watch tomorrow, that you'll be getting a review of way before this review even comes out. Let's go over my notes and we'll continue from there. I have to also skip some of my notes because I've already actually addressed some of these things. I should have skipped my first 3 paragraphs or so. Nope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have to skip my first 6 paragraphs of notes because I've already basically talked about them. Something about Richie. Oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was trying to remember earlier. So Richie, as I mentioned, he's in love with Margot. I thought it was kind of a bit sudden, like when I watched the movie, and then I noticed something. I mean, it's not like anything that was like hidden or whatever. It's stated at the beginning, but I didn't really like think about it because, when you're first watching something or whatever, it's like you don't know things until they happen. So they mentioned at the beginning of the movie with the childhood montage thing of Richie had tried painting and failed at it, and you see the paintings that he did, and every single one of the paintings is of Margot, and his romance stuff with Margot is like very one-sided until I think she kind of has to realize her feelings a little bit, but with Richie it's like super obvious. I think because of these paintings he's even just been in love with her the whole time. I mean, he does sort of say it where he's asked about it of like, how long have you been in love with her, and he just says always. So what I'm trying to say is I never really noticed that or thought about it really with the paintings or anything. I'm surprised I hadn't, because you think that's kind of weird of like, why is he just painting like all of these paintings of his sister? And it's not just like a couple, it's like there's enough to cover like a whole wall and everything. What else? Chaz, I talked about him a little bit of like how he's like super protective of his sons and stuff. He kind of pissed me off to watch as a character, not really because of the way he treats his sons, even though I felt bad for them about it, but it's the way Chaz treats his dad, because the whole thing is that Royal lies about like being sick. Like he tries to get back in his family's life by like pretending that he's dying of like stomach cancer or something. And the whole time Chaz is like kind of pissed at Royal. But it is also like kind of justified of like he knows that Richie was like the favorite child basically. Oh yeah, I forgot about it, but Chaz has like a BB gun bullet inside of his hand because Royal decided to shoot him for some reason, even though they were supposed to be on the same team and everything, and then Royal shoots him anyway and shoots him between the fingers, so it's like in his knuckle. Even when he's like an adult, they like never take it out or anything. There's kind of a lot of things Chaz is mad about with his dad. He's actually the last one out of him and his siblings that ends up like reconnecting with their father. Some of the scenes where Royal is with Uzi and Ari are kind of a bit funny. Like I mentioned, he's like a bad influence, but like they get to go do, I guess, supposedly fun things. They go go-karting, which is cool, but then they're also doing stuff like running into traffic, or not running directly into traffic, it's more of like crossing when the crosswalk's not working, and then egging cars, but then doing stuff like paying money to go look at like dogs fighting or whatever. I guess it's just the go-karting and the throwing eggs at cars thing that's kind of funny. What's interesting to me with Royal as a character is that he knows he screwed up with like basically letting his wife raise the kids. Like he never tried to go back in their life, or even though they were like separated or anything, he never tries to reconnect with his family until like the whole reason he fakes being sick and stuff, besides wanting to win back his wife, and he literally tells, I think, Pagoda about like, oh, I want them all to love me again or something, or to love me, I guess, is that he ends up getting kicked out of the hotel that he lives in, and he doesn't have any money, so he like literally has nowhere to go. And the house is like pretty huge anyway, so it's not like really that much of a bother that he's in there. But yeah, Royal, it's like he immediately knows what's wrong with everyone else and is like actually trying to help them and stuff. Like he thanks his wife for like raising the kids, and like he knows that Chaz hasn't gotten over his wife's death, and calling out Margot for like treating her husband badly by like stringing him along and like trying to connect with his grandkids and stuff. I kept writing nephews in my notes. I don't know why I was doing that. He's their grandfather. I guess because he doesn't actually look super old, so in my brain, I think some of the movie I was kind of thinking he was like their uncle, but he's not. But yeah, Royal, he kind of reminds me, I mentioned about Groundhog's Day. Let me actually just scroll to wherever the heck that note is. Where he tries to cheat at like winning his family back by like pretending to be sick. He gets tossed out. Before he gets tossed out, he's like trying to kind of weasel his way into their lives and trying to get them to talk to him and being in their way, but it's like they're not kind of all ready to like talk to him immediately. But then eventually the characters, like towards the end, he kind of like lets his family come to him about stuff, and then they slowly start reconnecting with him, but also his advice and the things that happen, kind of end up having this domino effect of like improving everyone's life, where he's then happily trying and like genuinely trying to fix stuff, like letting Henry and Etheline, he like approves of their relationship finally, even though like his opinion of it doesn't matter, but he was like kind of being a nuisance about it earlier. Where he's just happy to be part of their lives at all. So it's kind of nice. It gives me, Royal as a character just kind of gives me the same feeling as watching like Groundhog's Day, where you're like, gosh, this character is such a like bastard or something in the beginning, and then that you kind of enjoy seeing them like genuinely improve themselves and the lives of the people around them. I think that's like part of the fun of watching this movie, honestly. the liar revealed trope, you know how it is with movies where it's like there's someone, and it's always something I find really annoying actually. I guess it's not really the same effect here because usually it's something that happens in like by the third act of like someone has to lie about something and the lie revealed thing is always in like the third act where it's like this big dramatic scene where the lie, is revealed. Here it's more of like it's all at the beginning actually, where Henry calls out Royal for like, hey, you're not actually sick. I know what cancer looks like because my wife had it and stuff. Actually, that scene is so it happens at the beginning, of his lie being revealed that he's like not sick or anything. He still remains like part of their life though. But it's actually kind of funny in this case instead of annoying, that whole scene. I liked the part when Royal, I found it funny, he admits to having, like, everyone's, like, pissed at him, of course, for lying, for pretending he was going to die within, like, a month or whatever. And then he's like, hey, I do have high blood pressure, though, and then Angelica Houston's character just walks out. She doesn't even say anything. That was kind of funny. But yeah, Henry calling out Royal was great, where he like figures out with the pills, and even the hospital that Royal's pretending to like get the meds from isn't even real. He's all like bullshitting it and like paying people to help, and Pagoda was gonna help anyway. Though it is interesting that like, the family was sort of all brought together again, partially because they thought Royal was dying, but also some of them just decided they needed to live there again. So it was like the first time the family was together in like 17 years. And then they sort of kind of stay connected and in the area like throughout the movie and stuff. Eventually Royal does die. It's not specifically stated when. I assumed it was like within that year. So it does kind of work out of like, it is absolutely 100% shitty that he lied to his family, pretending he was going to like die just to like gain favor with them again. But at the same time, it was sort of good in a way that like, it kind of forced them all to like connect with him again, or more of like he's in their lives again, and then they eventually connect because eventually he's like the first one in the family to die. So it is sort of nice that like before he died, he got to like bond with his family and stuff. And then Pagoda actually stabs Royal after he's kicked out of the family. That actually got a laugh out of me as well because it was just so sudden. Where he just stabs him and I think calls him like a son of a bitch or something. And then the next scene is Pagoda like cleaning his wounds, or Royal's wounds or whatever on his stomach. I guess he just stabs people and he's upset. I don't know. I think it's crazy there's like at least 3 people that are in love with Margot. It took me a while to kind of just think about that as I was watching the movie. Because of course it's like Margot's husband. I do like that he calls her like my darling and stuff, like towards the beginning. Like he really is in love with his wife and she could not give like 2 shits about him. Like I said, I feel bad for Rayleigh as a character. And then Richie is in love with Margot, and that's kind of like his main thing throughout the movie. And then, which I'll actually talk more about that in a bit. And then Eli is also in love with Margot, which I was kind of confused about, where Margot has like a montage of lovers or something, and then it's revealed Eli's in there as well. I wasn't surprised that one of those lovers was a woman, actually, because I think that happens when Margot's like 21. There's literally like a list in that montage of like her age and the location or something. But yeah, she makes out with like, it's like literally a montage of her making out with all these people like all over the world and stuff till like the time she's like 30 or something. It is kind of funny though, like it goes through that montage and it's like, it's supposed to be in the story, like we're seeing it as a montage, but in the story the characters are reading it in some like file somewhere, and all that her husband has to say is just like she smokes, like that, like that's the thing he's surprised about, which is kind of funny because then he the characters are in the hospital for something I'm about to talk about, and he doesn't ask her about the, oh, you've had like a bunch of other lovers, because he already kind of had suspected since the beginning that she's having an affair, which is true. So he's not even like surprised. Oh, damn it! I should have explained about that to my dad. Actually, he asked me something about that while we watched the movie, and I forgot of like why I thought that Rayleigh was surprised about the cigarette thing and not the lovers thing. He already knew that his wife like didn't love her and everything. It's a cigarette thing he didn't know. But yeah, Margot's kind of more upset about her husband finding out, and like everyone else finding out that like she smokes more than like any of her like love life stuff. Um, but my favorite thing with Rayleigh is that in that scene, he kind of confronts her a bit, or sort of like puts her in a place a little bit, where he asks her for a cigarette and she's like, "You don't smoke," and he's like, do you need me to say it again or whatever? And I don't remember if she gives him a cigarette or not, but it's like his way of letting her know, like, hey, I know that you smoke, I know about your past and whatever. She's just like stunned about it and stuff, and he ends up leaving, and he doesn't come back, I think, until like the end. But I thought that was pretty good of him, like in his own way, standing his ground and stuff. So then there's like one of the sadder scenes in the movie where I don't remember if there's like a name for it. You know, when like a character has like a significant physical change, but it's like to signify that their mental health is getting like worse and not better. Where Richie, um, oh, oh, okay, I actually don't like that. Okay, so Richie, I just realized it in the poster, you know how he's like bald and like clean shaven and stuff? He, man, I kind of wish he didn't look like that in the poster. That's like sort of a spoiler-ish, kind of. Okay, for most of the movie, Richie has this like beard and really long, like shoulder length hair. I guess that's not really long, but like, you know, that's longer than usually men have it or whatever, or like compared to the other male characters. And he usually has like sunglasses and this tennis band thing that I mentioned earlier. And that's how he looks for like most of the movie. He doesn't get that haircut where he like, I guess, becomes like cleans up a bit, I think is the phrase people usually use for that, where he like cleans up a bit until a very specific scene in the movie. And normally you would see that as like a good thing or whatever, of like, oh, the character cleaned themselves up a bit and stuff and like taking more care of his appearance. But in this case, it's a bad mental health thing where he does it and there's like this blue lighting and stuff. And it's right before he tries a suicide attempt, actually. So it's kind of a signifier of like everything's getting worse for him. And you just see, even when he's doing the haircut and stuff, I think because like he knows what he's going to do or about to do, there's just, because the camera is like right in Luke Wilson's face, because he's supposed to be like, his character is in front of a mirror like trying to trim his beard and hair with like scissors. He doesn't even use like a trimmers thing or anything. He just uses like scissors, so it takes him a bit. There's just so much sadness in his eyes, and there's this like blue lighting and stuff in that bathroom. You don't, because he does it, the attempts with razors, you don't actually see him like cut anything with the skin. The way it's done, which I find kind of interesting, and I appreciate that because I didn't actually really want to like physically see it, was you see the next shot is of the bathroom sink and there's the hair around it and his arms are out, and then suddenly there's like blood that kind of comes out of nowhere and then is spilling out into the sink, and then he ends up sinking to the floor, and then another character comes in and sees him and he's all over the floor covered in blood. And it's kind of interesting where you expect in a scene like that suddenly you'd hear that person is like screaming, but there's actually no sound, and the character's mouth is open as if they're like screaming, and then it cuts to Richie being taken to like the hospital or something, and I think Rayleigh was there. I don't remember who else, but the family all like shows up for it and stuff. But that's always like a really strong, just seeing that whole thing. And then Chaz is trying to ask, and then Chaz is being kind of like annoying and insensitive, where he's trying to ask his brother like, why were you trying to do this attempt, and about wanting to read a suicide note that he doesn't want them to read anymore. We don't ever get to see it, and neither the characters. And I wrote in my notes like, damn, Chaz, you can't just ask someone why they tried to do that. But yeah, that's also the scene where Margot, or like the location where Margot has to talk to her husband and stuff. It's gotta be nice that like Henry shows up at the hospital as well, and he doesn't say like, oh, what happened or anything. He just says immediately like, how can I help? That's probably gotta be so nice for some, like, if you, well, he says it to Etheline, not to Richie. Richie's still in like the bed and stuff. That's probably gotta be so nice of like a loved one, is just in the hospital and everything, and your mind's probably spiraling all over the place, and then someone shows up and just asks how they can like ease your worries and stuff. I bet that's gotta be like so comforting. And then Royal actually tries to go to the hospital too. The thing is, at this point, he, because he got kicked out of the house and stuff, is working as a like, what is it called? Like a bellhop or something. Is that the person who's at a front desk in a hotel, or is that the person who works in the elevator? Whoever it is that works in the elevator, that's his job. And hold on a second. Sorry, it's weird hearing myself. I feel like I sound weird right now because I'm recording this at nighttime and I'm having to wear my retainer. I don't ever listen to these after I'm done recording. I don't edit anything, I just post. But I feel like I can hear myself as I talk. If I ever sound kind of weird in some of these, it's just during the day I don't wear a retainer, but at nighttime I do, and I'm like hearing myself a little. It's like, ugh. Anyway, yeah, Royal tries to get out of work and then go to see his son, But then by the time he gets there, it's nighttime and it's dark and everyone else is gone. He isn't allowed to see Richie. But I do think it's nice he did try to actually get to the hospital. I want to talk about the yellow tent, because the next scene's in the yellow tent. That's also one of the stronger scenes to me, or strongest. There's this yellow tent that Richie sleeps in, and I just think it's interesting that, like, that house is huge, right? And there's probably multiple places he can go or get into, like, a sleeping bag somewhere or whatever. But he's in, I think, like, the living room or something, and excuse me, it's just this teeny little yellow tent that he decides to stay in. But it is important, and it is pretty whimsical and cool. It has like a star lamp. It's actually pretty roomy in there, and a plot important sleeping bag is also in there. But the tent is important. It's where Margot and Richie finally admit their feelings. Which, like I said, that's probably weird of like being in love, but then raised as siblings, but yeah, they confess their feelings. There's a song I need to Google that is like pretty good in there. You even see the cover of the album jacket as well, but I don't remember what it is. And that's kind of the point in the movie where I finally noticed that Margot hasn't been wearing her fur coat. Like, I associate that so much with her character. And then I realized at that point, like, yeah, she hasn't really been wearing it for most of this. Like, she even has the striped, like, the full striped dress, no fur coat on the movie poster as well. I do think it's nice that Richie, like I said earlier about, like, people eventually go to Royal to talk about things rather than him, like, forcing his way back into their lives, where I think it's interesting that Richie, the first person he goes to talk about, like, how he, not the first person he's ever said, like, hey, I'm in love with Margot, because that person was Eli, and that sort of has to do with Margot finding out that Richie likes her and stuff. But he goes to talk to his dad after they like confirm their feelings for each other and is like trying to ask him for advice. And Royal doesn't really know what to tell him or anything. And then that's the point after their conversation when Richie's childhood hawk, Mordecai, shows up. And like I said, I sort of view Mordecai as like a symbol than anything. Not just of like he decided to come back when Richie's kind of trying to turn his life around and stuff. But also they mentioned that Mordecai, like Richie isn't even sure if it is Mordecai because he has these like white feathers, and Royal says he's like molting, and then later on Margot is with Richie towards the end of the movie, and they're with Mordecai, and she's commenting on the bird and saying something of like, oh, it's kind of like how after a traumatic experience someone's hair turns white. And I feel like Richie and Mordecai are kind of going down like the same path where they both had like a significant appearance change after like a traumatic experience and stuff, and but also that they're both, older too. Like I assumed that Mordecai, I don't know how hawk aging works. I just assumed the white feathers were like, this bird's already got to be like kind of old for being a bird, because it was already like kind of like a decent size, like when Richie was a child, and there's like a 22-year gap. It's like a 22 years later, like when the story actually starts and everyone's like an adult in their 30s or whatever, or at least of the like the ones that used to be kids and stuff. So that hawk has been around for a while. But that's the way I interpret it anyway. And then Richie and Royal, they go to confront Eli about his drug problem. I thought it was nice that like, Richie kind of has to go through some of his own issues and kind of be in a better place and then go on to like help his friends. But Eli mentions about how he like always wanted to be a Tenenbaum ever since he was a kid because he was like always over at their house and stuff. I kind of got that feeling anyway, but it was kind of nice to hear it. I just had kind of assumed that, especially because like you see at the beginning Eli lives, I think, with like his aunt or something, and they live in this really small apartment, and that's got to be, stir up some like feelings and stuff. If he lives in this apartment with just like one relative, and it's not in like the greatest condition, it's not in like a super good part of town. Oh wait, no, I'm thinking of a different location that's not in a good part of town. Never mind. I forget. Like, they're across the street from each other, and then having your childhood best friend lives in this house with like his two siblings and his parents and some other people and stuff, and there's always people over at that house, and to live in this like huge house, and their mother pays for them to like have all these activities and things. They learn like multiple languages and their hobbies and all this other stuff, and they're basically like adults when they're children in terms of like having jobs and things. So it's kind of a lot, like they have a lot compared to like Eli when they're kids. So I'm not surprised to hear that he like always wanted to be a Tenenbaum. Royal finally taking the chance to hang out with Margot is also nice, because he always kind of excluded her and Chaz, and he doesn't introduce her to strangers as like her being his adopted child or anything. They actually go to get ice cream in the ice cream parlor, and she looks like so miserable there, but it probably means the world to her anyway. And that's when the Peanuts song plays, and I finally realized which one it was, because I only heard the instrumental at first, and I was like, damn, which one is this? Which like holiday special is this? I knew it was either the Christmas one or the Halloween one. I thought it was from the Halloween one, or maybe Thanksgiving, but it's the Christmas time is here, so it's Christmas. I feel like that song kind of made the scene more sad. I don't know if that was supposed to be on purpose. And then Royal, finally divorces his wife and he approves her being with Henry and stuff, which is pretty good. And he tries to see if he could be on good terms with Henry, and it's kind of funny where Royal's like, I bet you see me as an asshole or whatever, and I think Henry says something like, I don't see you as an asshole, I just see you as a son of a bitch, which I feel like makes sense in its own way. So the day of their wedding comes, and that's pretty crazy. That's like the most action you get out of this movie, especially compared to some of the other ones, where Eli, so he ends up going to weddings based on, okay, so I forgot to mention when Richie, and it's important, Richie tries to confront him about the drug thing. I forgot to mention about how that resolves. Well, it sort of doesn't, where Eli ends up running outside and getting into a taxi because he doesn't want to go to like rehab. So he is still continuing with drug stuff. You don't see him for a while, but then he ends up on drugs again, and he has like face paint and stuff, and he's driving in his car, and he shows up to the wedding, or tries to, and he runs over the dog. The dog dies. He almost hits Chaz's sons, and Royal moves them out of the way to protect them. They end up fine though. I assumed the first time I watched it was going to be revealed that like Royal died trying to save them or something, but no, they end up moving out of the way. And then there's this really great chase scene actually where Chaz, finds out what Eli did and chases him around the house, and the camera is like directly behind like Ben Stiller and stuff. And then that's the point when they both realize they need help. And that's also kind of when Chaz finally connects with his dad, and that feels like a really nice moment as well, where the dad buys them a new dog from this, like, the fire truck that actually shows up to the place, if anything. He just buys their Dalmatian, and, he saved Chaz's son's lives and everything, but that's when he finally, like, connects with his dad for a bit. And that sort of works out for almost everyone, where like Eli goes to get help. I think they say he goes to like a rehab center in like North Dakota, and Margot writes a new play, and Richie teaches tennis to kids. And then it's mentioned that Royal dies of a heart attack at age 68, and I think it's interesting that Chaz is the only one that actually sees him die and rides in the ambulance, and the last scene is of his funeral, which I find a little funny just in the inscription he has written on the tombstone, because he originally has that planned out at the beginning of the movie where he wants his wife to like as a line to like read it and to proofread it before it gets put on. And you think with all the character development he went through of trying to be a better person and reconnecting with his family and stuff, that it would be maybe something short and sweet or like heartfelt or something, and instead it's some bullshit about like him saving his family's lives at sea or whatever, of saving them from like drowning off like a battleship or something completely made up, which I'm assuming is what he had originally written or whatever. But I just find that part of it kind of funny, of like you went through all this character development and then you have something that sounds more like what old you would have, but then you see this tombstone says 2001, and the movie also takes place in 2001, so it feels more like a reveal, at least for me it was, than anything of finding out like, oh, this is in 2001. Like, they don't say like how many years it's been when he like dies, when it's, because this is all just covered in the epilogue, but because it's made in 2001 I just assumed. But yeah, it's not obvious from the visual style or anything in this movie that it takes place in 2001, and isn't like the year is ever stated in the movie of like, this is the year now or whatever. But like I said, the characters are all sort of stuck in the past, and the movie itself is stuck in the past, so it kind of feels like a reveal to me than anything, but it still feels pretty cool. That was the thing I was like most surprised of when I watched the movie, where I'm like, this takes place in the 2000s, because it doesn't feel that way or anything. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a good movie. So far, I have to say it's my second favorite. Like I said, I still have to rewatch a lot of these. So now my new order, I guess, is the hotel one, this one, and then Moonrise Kingdom. And yeah, we'll see for the others because there's 5 that we're gonna be renting. I actually have to wait a day to watch the other ones. It's kind of interesting how many movies I'm watching at once. Where there's a very specific horror movie I've been literally counting down the days to watch. You're gonna get a review of that before this one. And then I'm probably gonna watch a Wes Anderson movie with my dad the next day, and which you'll get a review of after this. And then there's a Disney movie I'm gonna watch with my friends the next day, and you'll get a review of that. I think before this, my order got kind of changed. Where I originally had some movies for early December or something of movies I watched with my dad, and I thought that list was going to be so much shorter. So then I started pre-recording a sort of next chunk of December of movie chick flicks I'm watching by myself or whatever, or kind of more girly movies, I guess. And now that list is going to be sort of flopped a little, in that I have to stop with the the chick flick sort of movies and then go on to Wes Anderson. So kind of throws off my scheduling a little bit, but it's not too bad. Alright, so I have 3 days of movies ahead of me, but they should hopefully all be good, because it's going to be at least 2 I've seen and 1 I have not seen yet. So see you then. Bye bye.